We are in week number 5 of our series, 12 Men, and today we're going to be looking at Philip. Before we get to him, looking at the disciples, who they were, I want to run through these really quick. Week number 1, we talked about Peter. Peter was bold, he was emotional, he was the over-talker in the group. You know, Peter would be the one, if we were to sit together in a small group, Peter would be the one that would dominate the conversation. He wears his emotions on his sleeve, he shares the first thing that comes to his mind. He's the over-talker, he's the one that Jesus probably had to be like, shh, stop talking, right? Peter, love him. Week number 2, we looked at John. John was brilliant, calculated, a leader who loves justice, one of the sons of thunder. He became unstoppable when he fully accepted the work of Christ. This acceptance of Christ's justice led him to become known as the apostle of love. Now, John would be the guy, if you were in a small group setting, he'd be the one going, well, actually, you ever met people like that? We talked about this the last couple of weeks. So, Peter, here we go. We got to get the big picture as we introduce another person into this small group, Philip. But here we go in the small group. So you got John and you got Peter. Peter's the one going in going, man, he's the exaggerator of the group. So he's the one walking in going, man, it was incredible. We went fishing the other night and we caught a ton of fish and they were this big. And John, of course, Mr. Well, actually, he'd be the one going, well, actually, we didn't catch a ton of fish. We actually only caught, 35 of them. And out of the 35 fish, they were only about this big. They weren't this big. John was Mr. Well, actually, all right? So you get in the picture in your mind who these people are? So you got Peter, dynamic, bold, over-talker, dominates the conversation. You got John, Mr. Well, actually. You got week number 3, Matthew. Matthew was the vile sinner. He's the outcast of the group. He is the traitor to the people. This tax collector would have sided with the very enemy. These people would have seen Rome as the enemy. In fact, some historians believe that at the height of taxation, Matthew and his people could have collected up to 90% of the income from the Jews. You think it's rough in our day and age, right? 90% of their income could have been collected. I mean, Matthew was seen as a traitor who had given in, sided with the enemy, all for the good life, money and power, influence. So in a small group setting, Matthew would be the one to walk in the room and people are going, what is he doing here? Then you have Thomas, doubting Thomas. We looked at him last week. Thomas, a natural doubter, the pessimist of the group, who becomes a powerful missionary when he chooses Jesus and sticks to it. Now Thomas is, he's the Eeyore of the group, right? Everything's terrible. Life is bad. Like we talked about yesterday as we ran through all the scriptures on Thomas, he was one going, we'll follow you, Jesus, but we're all going to die, right? That's him. I'm committed to you, Jesus, but we're all going to die. So Tom, so you may be the Thomas. You may be negative Nancy, the bad. Now, if your name's Nancy, I do love you. I do love you. But so that's Thomas, man. Thomas is that guy. He's Mr. Grumpy, Mr. Eeyore. Everything's awful. You know people like that. Now we're going to introduce a new person, Philip. But before we do, we need to work on our scripture memory verse, right? I love this. We're doing scripture memory for a series. It's fun. John 15:5 is our scripture memory verse. I'm going to read this to you. Of course, our kids have been working on it in the children's ministry. Vacation Bible Family Fellowship has been doing it. We're doing it. We're getting this verse to heart. This verse is the secret sauce of the disciples, man. It's what makes them great. These guys weren't necessarily the most educated. They weren't necessarily the most influential. These guys weren't necessarily the biggest and the strongest and the fastest. I mean, what made these guys great wasn't their physical stature. What made them great was something different. John 15:5. I am the vine. I'm going to read this to you, and then we're going to read it together. Cool? So let me read it to you first. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. John 15:5. All right, we're going to do this together. You ready? I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, it is that bears much fruit. That's it. That's the secret sauce. That's what made these guys great. Okay, so if you're in the room this morning and you're going, you know what? I love Jesus and I want to be a part of his mission, but I'm not the smartest. I'm not great at defending my faith. Sometimes I even wrestle with my faith. You may be sitting out there this morning going, you know what? I've got some pretty dark places in my heart. You may be sitting out there this morning going, you have no idea the mess that I've left in my life. I want you to know what made the disciples great wasn't their perfection. They weren't so holy, right? What made these guys great was their abiding in Jesus. Be abiding in Jesus. All right, so let's introduce Philip into the small group. A couple things about Philip as we learn him, who he was. Philip, I'm going to give you a brief overview from a lot of commentaries and study and scriptures that I've gone through, right? So here's the big picture of Philip. Who was Philip? Philip's hometown, Bethsaida in Galilee. Philip is a Greek name meaning lover of horses, right? There you go, food for thought, right? There you go. Philip, a Greek name meaning lover of horses. He must have had a Jewish name too, MacArthur says this, because all 12 of the apostles were Jewish, but his Jewish name is never given. Now this is incredibly important. For those that like to study historical literature, want to know the context history, this is incredibly important that they never give his Jewish name. They only give his Greek one in Scripture. Culturally, it defines him with a group of people called the Hellenists. Philip was most likely associated with these people. He was most likely a Hellenist. Hellenists were conquered people who had ethnically given in to the influence of Greek language, culture, and customs. The Hellenist Jews didn't look Jewish anymore. Philip would have looked, acted, and talked like an outsider to the Jews. If you don't look like a good holiness church attender, you might be a Philip. You might be a Philip. Unlike Matthew, he wasn't necessarily seen as a traitor. However, he could have been the one that did and said things that weren't necessarily kosher. In a modern context, he may be the one who loves Jesus. Okay, so to make this modern, in a modern world, modern context, he might be the one who loves Jesus but smells like smoke, drinks a beer in the evenings, and wears a Mumford & Sons t-shirt to church. He looks American, not necessarily Christian, but he absolutely still loves Jesus. Do you get it? This is who Philip was. So Philip is a guy, because of Hellenist, his background, right, what he'd been through, he grew up in a home that had adopted the culture. So they look like the culture. He would have looked like a culture. This is the guy who maybe grew up in a Christian home, but he grew up in a Christian home that only went to church on Christmas and Easter. This is a Christian guy who grew up in a Christian home that maybe called themselves Christian to make it modern. What does this mean for us today, right? Who maybe grew up in a Christian home, who still called themselves Christian, but everything about their life didn't look like they grew up in a good holiness church. Is this making sense? Many scholars think Philip would have been among the first disciples of Jesus to follow Jesus. The first of the disciples to follow Jesus. Philip was an evangelist. As we get a picture of who he was. He didn't always have the answers. In fact, Scripture shows that he was actually quite off at times. But he pointed people to Jesus. He seems to have connected well with people, even those who were antagonistic towards the gospel. All right, now pay attention to what's happening here. This is seen when Philip recruited the skeptical Nathaniel, Bartholomew, as an apostle in John 1:45-51. He may have been, again, this is speculation, but he may have been, based on what we see in Scripture and study, he may have been like the salesman personality, right? He knows how to mirror your language, how to shake your hand, how to laugh at your jokes. He can connect with you when others can't. He may have been the salesman personality. Church tradition states that Philip preached in Asia Minor and ended up being martyred there. All right, I want to do two stories out of Scripture about Philip, and then we're going to do a SWOT analysis on this ancient character. You ready? Story number one, John 14:8-11. John 14:8-11. Philip said to him, "Lord, show us the Father, and it is enough for us." All right, so Philip is making this statement to Jesus, and Jesus replies to him, "I have been with you so long, and you still do not know me, Philip? Whoever has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, 'Show us the Father'? Do you not believe that I am the Father and the Father is in me? The words that I say to you, I do not speak on my own authority, but the Father who dwells in me does his work. Believe me that I am the Father, that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me. Or else believe on account of the works themselves." All right, so here we go. Let me give you a little background. Jesus' ministry, this is before he's getting ready to go to the garden, before he's getting ready to go ultimately to the cross. His time of mentoring and training the disciples is coming to an end quickly. In a few moments, Jesus is going to hit the big crescendo of why he has come to the planet. The conversations leading into this verse are interesting. One disciple is going to betray, another will deny. It's clear the time for these young students to graduate has come, and they still don't get it. Philip doesn't even get it yet. I was trying to think of like modern in my mind, what would this be like? What would it feel like? I remember when I was finishing my undergraduate degree in Oklahoma, and I was coming near the end, and we were sitting in a classroom, one of my professors who I really admire, and all of us young students we were weeks away from getting ready to go out. Some were going to go into ministry, some were going to go do more education, but we were getting ready to all spread out, disappear. We'd spent the last 4 years together. And as we were there, the thought of going out, I'm excited about it, the other guys are excited about it. Our professor was a little bit emotional, he was sentimental. Because I really didn't know what I was getting into. I really didn't know what the next step would be like. I was excited about it, but I really didn't know what it was. And our professor understood better of what we were getting into, and because of that, he was emotional. Our emotions were, hey, we're going to see you later, but we're going on with life. It'll be good. In fact, some of us are really ready to be done with school. But our professor who loved us understood the weight of what was getting ready to happen. Let me give you another example. When my grandpa was dying, I don't know if you've ever lost a loved one, but in those final weeks when somebody's dying and like there's no pill you can take, there's no more radiation, there's nothing else that you can do, death is imminent. They're on their deathbed. When you're with somebody like that, they tend to share with you the things that they see as most important. And I don't know if you've ever walked in a room like that, where you walk in the room and they're hooked up to tubes. It's a struggle to even breathe. And if you've been there, you'll even remember the smell of the hospital. If it's somebody you really love, you'll remember the emotion in the room. You may even remember the person, and even if they love Jesus, there's a little bit of fear, because what's this going to be like? And to pray with somebody where death is imminent, to be with a loved one where death is right around the corner. And what people will share with you is they'll share the things that matter the most to them. So like with my grandpa, he'd say things like, Michael, you love your wife. You hear me? Yes, Grandpa, I hear you. Michael, you love your kids. You hear me? Yes, Grandpa. And here at this moment in history, the crescendo of Jesus' ministry is about to happen. He's in the room with these young disciples, these people that he's been training, and it's emotional to him. He's been trying to share with them what's going to happen, and they still don't get it. And in this powerful moment, Philip even throws out a statement that's almost frustrating. As a reader, I think, man, you're getting ready to do this. The weight of the future of Christianity is on your shoulders, disciples, and you're still asking questions like you don't get it. The Crossway study note says it like this. Philip's request shows that he has not yet understood the point of Jesus' coming, namely to reveal the Father, cross-referencing 1, 14, and 18. John Calvin said it like this, show us the Father. It appears to be that statement, show us the Father, in the text that Philip made, right? It appears to be very absurd that the apostles should offer so many objections to the Lord. For why did he speak but to inform them that on this point which Philip puts in the question, yet there is not one of their faults that is here described that may not be charged on us as well as on them? We profess to be earnest in seeking God, and when he presents himself before our eyes, we too are blind. So close to Jesus leaving, so close to their graduation day, so close to the one that they love so deeply going away, and they don't get it. And this is powerful on a couple of fronts because you need to know, you may be in this room, and in our culture, we are obsessed with education and more education and have to have education. And we almost believe, especially in suburban Western culture, we almost believe that you can't do anything till you're fully educated to do something. And the whole world needs you to think that way. Our economy needs you to think that way because you need to pay for more degrees. Now listen, I'm a fan of education. I love it. Even now, I'm on the hunt for my PhD program. I really want to do it. And we'll see how that works out with my wife. I'm sure we've got a few more fights about that, but I want to do it. And so I love education, totally for education. She supports me. She's wonderful. Totally for education. I think it's wonderful to do, but you need to know we have become so hamstrung by the fear of engaging where we don't feel fully educated. And many people that attend church never invite their friends to come. They never interact with their coworkers because they don't feel capable. I can't, Pastor Mike. I mean, I don't know what I would say. And what if they ask questions about, the age of the universe, or what about dinosaurs, or what am I going to say? I don't know what to do. I can't. I'm afraid I'm going to mess it up. What if I make it worse? And here with the disciples in this moment, they are ready to be sent out, and clearly they don't get it yet either. You're in good company. Story number 2, John 6, 1 through 7, a little bit about Philip. John 6, 1 through 7. This is, of course, the context here of the scripture. We want to look at history, context, and grammar, all the different pictures that are all the pieces to understand this. This is Jesus feeds the 5,000. Verse number 1, after this, Jesus went away to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which was the Sea of Tiberias. And a large crowd was following him because they saw the signs that he was doing on the sick. All right, so people are becoming healed. Jesus went up on the mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. Now the Passover, the feast of the Jews, was at hand. Lifting up his eyes then, and seeing that a large crowd was coming towards him, Jesus said to Philip, all right, he's calling Philip out, "Where are we to buy bread so that these people may eat?" He said this to test him. Jesus said this to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread would not be enough for each of them to get a little. Okay, so let's get the picture, a little context here. It is Galilee, springtime, shortly before the Passover. Now, in our culture, I love this. In our culture, being in Indiana, it's different than being in Dallas. We've been up here for about 3 years now. And in Indiana, during the heart of winter, my neighborhood is like a ghost town. You don't see anybody, nobody comes outside. And when you do bump into people in the public, they just tell you how terrible everything is. That's the way winter works in Indiana, I'm discovering, okay? Now, what happens in the spring is really interesting. It's like gophers popping out everywhere out of their houses, man. People start showing up. They start walking outside. People are walking dogs. They're smiling. That lady 3 houses down, and every time in the winter I drive by her and I wave, she'd be like, and she's mad at the snow, not me. I didn't know that. And for the first time, she's walking her little loud poodle, and she's waving at me, smiling. I'm going, I thought you hated me. That's great. Springtime is crazy in Indiana. I mean, everybody starts getting out. They're having a great time. They're engaging. This is the season. So here, springtime, Galilee, Jesus is working miracles. People are coming out there engaging in powerful ways. We're seeing life begin, trees, life, everything's starting to come around. I love that. Love the springtime. I love the way the Expositor's Bible commentary says, it says, perhaps some of the people belonged to a crowd of pilgrims who had come together from different parts of northern Galilee in preparation for the annual pilgrimage to Jerusalem. So here we have this. I mean, put this in your mind. People have traveled a long ways. The Passover is about to begin. It's springtime. There are thousands in the community that aren't probably usually there. Jesus is working miracles. People are being healed. The deaf can hear. The blind can see. The lame can walk. Everybody's showing up. There's excitement happening in the ministry. They gather outside. Jesus is teaching. Thousands that are migrating in. These people, many of them were probably hungry and tired from traveling. In the middle of this, Philip makes a profound statement. and gives us a picture of his down-to-earth, realist personality. 200 denarii worth of bread would not be enough for each of them to get a little. 200 denarii constitutes roughly 8 months' wages, since one denarius was about 1 day's pay. I want you to imagine in your mind a packed crowd, Jesus working incredible miracles, and he turns to Philip and he says, how much or how are we going to feed these people? And while Philip is watching deaf hear, blind see, lame walk, he makes a statement that disregards the miraculous. In the middle of watching all of this happen, he makes a statement that disregards the miraculous. All right, let's do a quick SWOT analysis on an ancient biblical character. This is always fun to do. I like doing this part. Now, as best as we can. Now, you need to know, as we study the disciples, we know a lot about Peter and Matthew and John. The further we get into these disciples, the less and less we have written about them. All right, so here we go. Quick SWOT analysis for somebody like a Peter or like a Philip. Somebody like a Philip. This may be you. Strengths. Possible strengths for Philip. People like Philip may be sanguine by nature. We saw this with his evangelistic personality. Bartholomew, Nathaniel, right? When he goes up to him, the person who's antagonistic towards the gospel, he may be a salesman, friendly with everyone. It's a great possible gift if you are like a Philip. Philip, people like Philip because he's got a great personality. He's easy to hang out with. Another strength, because he didn't grow up immersed in the Jewish culture, even though he was Jewish, he grew up a Hellenist Jew. So even though he didn't grow up in the Jewish culture, he understands outsiders really well. He has the potential to be an incredible missionary because he gets people that aren't church attenders. He gets them. He dresses like them. He goes to the same concerts. Potential weaknesses if you are a Philip. You may be so like the world, people can't see any change in you. You may be so like the world that people cannot see any tangible change in you. Another weakness, you could be a people pleaser, more interested in pleasing the ones that you were around than God. Now, salesman personalities are really good at this. They can walk into a crowd, and whatever crowd they're with, they just adapt to it. No problem. I can talk like you, act like you, shake hands like you, smile like you. I can do it just like you and make you feel comfortable. Another potential weakness could be if you are a personality like that, that inconsistency can make you appear shallow or fake. Potential threats, if this is you or you are like a Philip. If you are a type of Philip, the crowd may easily sway you. Cultural pressure could be a problem. Another potential threat, though you get the crowd, it's easy for you to fall into the crowd. The culture may look really, really good to you. Okay, so let me give you a picture here real quick. If you are a Philip, you live in two worlds. You grew up culturally used to how people think and act and talk. You connect with people really well in the community. You go to the same concerts. I mean, you've been around it your whole life. You naturally are in the world. Okay, now, if you grew up in the church and your whole life you've been the really good Sunday school led, Sunday school taught, memorized scripture at 3 years old all the way through, your best friends have always been in the church, always been in the youth group, every trip you ever took with either with your Christian parents or with your Christian church, if that's you all the way through the church, it may be really difficult for you to connect with those outside of the church. And for you, you maybe have some things that are easier that you don't even know. You see, when you go home, when you graduate and you've been in the church your whole life, you go to college and you move away, when you go home for the holidays, you go home to a wonderful, loving, solid Christian family. Your best friends are people that have probably grown up in the church too. And so your whole world, the call of your friends, the call of your church, the call of your family is all calling you back into church. That's the call. But if you're a Philip, you're different. If you're a Philip, you grew up your whole life outside, even though you may call yourself Christian, you grew up your whole life outside of the normal, solid Christian environment. You went to church maybe Christmas, maybe Easter. But most of the concerts you go to aren't solid. The call of your friends isn't the call into the church, it's the call into the world. And so if you are a Philip, you have your heart who's turned to God, and you have this constant dichotomy, this constant frustration of all of the rest of your world, and you're constantly pulled between these two environments. If you know that tension, you might be a Philip. But you have some wonderful opportunities. Even though that situation may be hard, you have some wonderful opportunities. I'm going to invite Jason up, and we're going to close out here in just a second. If you are a Philip and you feel that tension, there's constant tension between this new Jesus that you love. And maybe you've called yourself Christian, but now you have that right relationship, this new Jesus that's connecting in your heart, and you're feeling this deep tension that's always pulling you in another direction. You may feel this. I want you to know, though this may be hard, it could be an incredible opportunity. Evangelism, evangelism, evangelism. You understand the culture way better than those who grew up immersed only in Christian culture. You understand it better. The Nathaniel, the Bartholomew, the one under the tree in the scripture that we talked about earlier, that guy who's antagonistic towards the gospel, you can walk up to him and have a conversation, and it fits, it works, because you know how he thinks, you know what he values, you know how he sees the world. You get it. If you are a Philip, you already maybe have really close friends that you eat lunch with on a daily basis, maybe at work, who are not Christian, and you can laugh with them, you can spend time with them, you can connect with them. It's easy for you. Evangelism, evangelism, evangelism. You understand the culture way better than those who grew up immersed only in Christian culture. There's a huge danger and a huge opportunity because of people like Philip. This could be a threat, but is also an opportunity. You have lots of friends, family, and relationships outside the church as well as inside the church. Because you have many friends and family outside of the church as well as inside the church, make sure not to be swayed by public opinion. And this may be a struggle for the natural salesperson, people pleaser. Keep connected to other believers and ask them to hold you accountable. Stay consistent, all while going out and continuing to reach the people that you work with, that you spend time with. When I was doing youth ministry, I had a lineman on the football team at the high school, and the quarterback of the football team, who both became solid Christians in high school doing ministry. Okay, so now get the picture. These are guys that may not always say the right Christian things. These are the people in the youth group, when they raise their hand to pray, they're not going, hey, I've had a bit of a rough day. These are the ones going, man, my coach is in and I need prayer. Well, I mean, this guy doesn't get the Christian culture yet. These are the people who walk into the youth group and they still are wearing the t-shirts, and I'm thinking, you might need to go into the bathroom and turn that inside out, right? These people don't get it yet. They're not fully in camp yet. They don't know all of the norms of the Christian. They don't get the whole holiness thing yet. It's not there quite yet. But here's the thing that I do know. When I sat down with my wonderful, solid, love Jesus, been in the church their whole life Christians, and I say, invite your friends to church, they look at me and say, my friends are already in church. And that's not bad. That's a good thing. But when I sat down and I looked at these two, and I said, man, invite your friends to church, they're like, beep, yeah, that's a great idea, right? And these guys don't get it yet. Their hearts quite aren't in the right place. And I remember one Sunday morning, we had 2 rows packed with over half of the high school football team. And I sat there and I thought, holy smokes, like, these guys really do, because they're in two worlds still, because they're still working it out, because they are Philip. They're Hellenist Jews in our modern culture. They speak the language, they make the connection, they filled the rows. And you know what we need to have happen? Because we are a small group in the church. We have the Peters, we have the Johns, we have the Matthews, we have the Phillips, we have all of us. We represent this small group. And what we need are our rock solid, know the Bible, theologically sound, love holiness Christians to support and engage and uplift and empower the Phillips. And when the Phillips don't know the answers, because the Phillips will go up, even in the Bible we saw this, we didn't have time to go into all of it. When Philip says he doesn't know the answer, he's like, I love Jesus. And they're going, well, what about the age of the universe? That wasn't one of the questions in the Bible. That's one I hear today. Philip goes, I don't know, but go talk to the guy who grew up in the church and spent his whole life here and knows the deep theology. And together they make a profound impact in their community. We need each other. If you are a Philip, I challenge you this morning. Even if you don't have all the answers, be bold, proclaim your faith, make a stand for Jesus, work with people who are different, and transform your world. I dare you to do it.